The old Blackwood house stood atop Widow's Hill, a looming shadow against the stormy twilight. Its windows, like dark eyes, seemed to watch over the town below, a silent sentinel of secrets long buried. The mansion, with its crumbling facade and overgrown gardens, was a relic of a bygone era, a place where time itself seemed to stand still. Locals whispered tales of its inhabitant, Mr. Blackwood. They spoke in hushed tones, afraid that even the walls had ears. Stories of his eccentricities and mysterious ways were passed down through generations, each more chilling than the last. He was a recluse, an enigma. Rarely seen, he was a figure of speculation and fear. Some claimed to have caught glimpses of him through the mansion's grimy windows, a solitary figure shrouded in darkness. Some said he was ancient, his skin as pale as bone. They believed he had lived for centuries, sustained by dark rituals and forbidden knowledge. His eyes, they said, were like black holes, voids that could swallow your soul. Others claimed he was cursed, forever bound to the house. They spoke of a pact made with malevolent forces, a deal that granted him immortality at a terrible price. The house, they said, was a prison as much as it was a sanctuary. No one dared to approach, not any more. The path leading to the mansion was overgrown and treacherous, a journey few were willing to undertake. The air around the house was thick with an oppressive energy, a palpable sense of dread. Not since the disappearances started. The first to vanish was Old Man Hemlock, last seen wandering towards the hill on a foggy night. His disappearance was the beginning of a series of unexplained events that would haunt the town for years. The first to vanish was Old Man Hemlock, last seen wandering towards the hill on a foggy night. His disappearance was the beginning of a series of unexplained events that would haunt the town for years. Then it was little Timmy Carter, his red tricycle found abandoned at the foot of the hill. The sight of the tricycle, a stark contrast against the dark path, sent chills down the spines of those who found it. The townsfolk whispered, their fears taking root. They gathered in small groups, sharing their theories and suspicions. Each new disappearance added fuel to the fire, deepening the mystery and the fear that gripped the town. "Mr. Blackwood," they said, "he's taken them." The legend of the Blackwood house grew with each passing year, a dark tale that cast a long shadow over the town. And so the mansion stood, a silent witness to the fear and speculation that surrounded it, its secrets locked away, waiting to be uncovered. "Bet you won't go," sneered Jake, his breath misting in the chilly October air. The group of teenagers huddled closer, their faces illuminated by the dim streetlights. The air was thick with anticipation and the scent of fallen leaves. Chicken. The taunts echoed through the night, bouncing off the old brick buildings. 16-year-old Danny felt a surge of defiance rise within him, his heart pounding in his chest. He clenched his fists, determined not to let fear show on his face. It was Halloween night, and the Blackwood Dare was an annual tradition. The streets were lined with jack-o'-lanterns and eerie decorations, casting long shadows that danced in the flickering light. Every year, someone dared, someone chickened out. The legend of Blackwood's haunted house loomed large in their small town. This year, Danny wouldn't be the coward. He had something to prove, not just to his friends, but to himself. "Fine," Danny retorted, his voice tight with determination. He could feel the eyes of his friends boring into him, waiting for him to back down. "I'll go." The words hung in the air, a challenge accepted. The dare was simple, stupid even, but it was a rite of passage in their town. The dare was simple, stupid even: knock on Blackwood's door, leave a candle on the porch, and run. The old Blackwood house stood at the end of the street, its windows dark and foreboding. Stories of ghosts and strange noises had kept most people away for years. Danny took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He could feel the weight of the candle in his hand, its flame flickering in the breeze, and run. No one ever saw who opened the door. No one wanted to. The mystery of Blackwood's door was part of the thrill, part of the fear. As Danny approached the house, he could feel his heart racing, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. This was it, the moment of truth. The moment. The wind howled like a banshee as Danny trudged up the hill. The trees, gnarled and skeletal, clawed at the sky, their shadows long and menacing twisted on the ground. With each step the air grew colder, heavier. Fear, cold and clammy, gripped Danny's heart. He could hear his own breath, ragged and loud in the stillness of the night. Or was it stillness? A twig snapped behind him. He whirled around, heart pounding. Nothing. Just the wind whispering secrets through the trees. Blackwood was waiting. The Blackwood house loomed before him, a grotesque silhouette against the dying light. The windows were dark, lifeless eyes staring out into the night. Danny fumbled for the lighter in his pocket. His hand trembled as he lit the candle. As he reached for the doorknob, a face appeared in the window. A withered face framed by white hair, eyes, dark and intense, bored into his soul. Danny gasped, dropping the candle. The flame sputtered and died, plunging him into darkness. The face was gone. Section 5. The Disappearing Portrait. Danny, his breath caught in his throat, picked up the candle and lit it again. The flickering flame cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the room seem even more ominous. He could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in on him, but he knew he had to keep going. He had to prove his courage. This old house, with its creaking floors and whispering walls, had always been a source of fear and fascination for him. Tonight he was determined to face it head-on. He knocked, the sound heavy and echoing in the silence. Each knock seemed to reverberate through the entire house, as if the very walls were alive and responding to his presence. He waited, his heart pounding against his ribs. No answer. The silence was deafening, and the longer he stood there, the more his anxiety grew. He could almost hear the whispers of the past residents urging him to turn back. He pushed the door open a crack. The hinges groaned in protest, as if they hadn't been moved in years. The darkness beyond was impenetrable, but he steeled himself and stepped forward. The air inside was thick with dust and the scent of decay. He stepped inside. The room was filled with old, decaying furniture, each piece telling a story of a time long past. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the floor was covered in a thick layer of dust. A grand staircase spiraled into darkness. It seemed to beckon him, urging him to climb and discover what lay beyond the shadows. With a deep breath he began his ascent, each step creaking under his weight. On the wall hung a portrait, its eyes following him. He blinked. The portrait was gone. He rubbed his eyes, convinced it was a trick of the light, but the feeling of being watched remained, replaced by a blank wall. The emptiness was unsettling, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was still there, lurking just out of sight. He took a step back, his mind racing with questions. What had he just witnessed? And what other secrets did this house hold? Section 6. A blood-curdling scream. A floorboard creaked above him. Danny froze, his blood turning to ice. Something was watching him. He could feel its presence, cold and menacing. He started up the stairs, each step echoing in the silence. The air grew thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something metallic. Blood. A blood-curdling scream pierced the silence, echoing through the house. It was his own. Section 7. Vanished without a trace. The next morning the townsfolk found the Blackwood door wide open. The candle from the previous night lay extinguished on the porch. Danny was never seen again. Searches yielded nothing, no trace of him, no sign of a struggle. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The mystery of his disappearance deepened the town's fear of Mr. Blackwood. Section 8. Whispers in the Wind. They whispered about the Blackwood curse. Some said Mr. Blackwood was a warlock, stealing souls to fuel his immortality. Others claimed the house itself was alive, swallowing people into its darkness. No one dared to venture up Widow's Hill any more. The truth of Danny's disappearance remained elusive, a chilling whisper carried on the wind. But one thing was certain: the Blackwood house held its secrets close. Section 9. The Blackwood curse lives on. Years passed, and the Blackwood house remained, a constant reminder of the town's unspoken fear. On Halloween night the wind seemed to whisper Danny's name, a mournful echo in the darkness, and some swore they saw a flickering candlelight in the window of the Blackwood house, a beacon in the night. The Blackwood curse, it seemed, lived on.